I'm about to bring on to our show the Christian Peverelli. And Christian is the co-founder of WeAreNoCode, an educational platform that empowers non-technical founders through no-code technology. He's a serial entrepreneur and digital strategist with over a dozen years of experience building startups, running accelerators, and consulting for Fortune 500 companies and celebrities. As a trainer, he served as the co-director of a startup program that has helped over 100 startups go on to raise over $40 million in funding and get accepted into accelerators like Techstars, Y Combinator, and 500 Startups. He's also a specialist in the no-code and workflow automation ecosystem. So with that being said, super excited to welcome to the Moonshot House community today, none other than Christian Peverelli. Christian, are you with us here, sir?
I am indeed. Let me see why my video is having a little issue. In the meantime, I also have my co-founder, Eddie Whitaker, who's going to join me and is also going to be sort of running this little workshop with me. Eddie, maybe you can come live as I'm figuring out my video settings here in Zoom. It seems to be the story of my life lately.
Happy to do that. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Eddie, how are you? Welcome, and thanks for being here today.
Of course. Excited.
Well, awesome. Well, hopefully you can resolve these technical issues. Like I said, we were having some issues with screen sharing earlier with Simon. So I just sent off a text to Eric over at Zoom. He's jumping right on it and going to try to fix things up for all of us. So Eddie, while we're waiting for Christian to rejoin us, maybe you can tell a little bit about your role at WeAreCode and share a little bit about the background of what you guys are up to.
Yeah, happy to do that. So my formal background is I used to work at an agency where I was leading product and innovation. So I was working with product teams on a day-to-day basis and also doing a lot of research when it comes to AI, when it comes to new ways of creating content, in particular around AI, machine learning, our day-to-day was essentially prototyping for our clients. And we had a couple of really awesome clients, including Honda, Lexus, Ritz-Carlton, and so on. And what we did all the time is prototype. And usually the prototyping cycle takes a couple of weeks, 2 months. And we started to adopt no-code tools. In other words, tools that allow you to prototype or actually create applications just faster, to the point where we are now in 2021, you can essentially use these newer tools to build entire businesses with it. And in today's presentation, we'll just talk about no-code and how that applies to building startups with no-code or with those newer tools that are out there today.
Well, that sounds incredibly intriguing and looking forward to the workshop, Eddie. Mm-hmm. And where are you currently out of right now? Where are you based?
In LA, Marina del Rey.
Fantastic. Awesome. So I know that we're hopefully going to have Christian back on here shortly. He's reconnecting to audio. And let's go ahead and just make sure, Christian, maybe you can check to see if you're able to at least screen share, or were you planning on just doing a chat session with us today?
So we're going to be doing an actual presentation. Let me just check, because since this doesn't work, I'm wondering if my presentation will or will not work. So just give me a little sec on that. I'm going to share that.
And no worries. So we'll see if you can go ahead and share. So while we're waiting for that, folks, I just wanted to make sure that oh, there we go. Look at that. Hello.
There we go. Well, you can't see me.
Predict this with this slide?
There you go. I mean, we can get started if you're already here.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to turn over the session to you and Eddie and Christian along the way. Is your preference to just basically flow through the entire presentation and maybe do a Q&A at the end? Or is your preference to take questions along the way? Or do you have like planned stops or breaks in your session to take questions?
Yeah, the idea is we want to make this as sort of interactive as possible, but we're just going to want to set a little bit of the playing ground to begin with. So we're probably going to do about half the session, little presentation, explain to you a little bit of what no-code is, what's possible, and show you some real life examples. tell you a little bit about us as well. And then we're going to essentially open up to all the people's questions. So anyone who's here, who's wondering how no-code tools or this movement can sort of play a part in their life and can really empower them. We're answering questions here, and we really want to make it like just kind of like a back and forth conversational and all that.
Awesome. Well, we'll turn the platform over to you, Christian and Eddie, and thank you so much for being here. And let's turn it over to you so our audience can enjoy some no code.
Awesome. Let's do it. So Eddie will jump in just a little second to give us some examples and showcase some things that we're seeing the audience doing. But I'm going to start off by sort of giving you an introduction to ourselves, to no code. And I'm going to briefly bring you through, we put together a workshop called Building Startups Without Code. We presented it to many sort of very established universities like USC, UCLA, et cetera, and also have gotten great feedback from people in terms of the value. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding right now around this entire movement, and we just want to kind of clarify things and then really just answer questions, because everyone's just kind of wondering, like, how are these skills of the future going to allow, why is it relevant to me? So we usually start off with a very simple statement that there is no easy way to build a startup. And that being said, there is definitely a smart way. And I think that for those of you joining us who have experience in the startup world, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyone who kind of makes it seem like it's very easy on the media, whether it's through talking about, a team that's raised $40 million with a pitch deck, or online gurus promising passive income sitting on the beach in Mexico, these are not very realistic. And so we just want to start off by saying, there's no easy way, but there is a smart way. I'll introduce you to myself. First of all, the very nice introduction already took place. I'm born in Switzerland, lived and grew up pretty much all over the world: France, Brazil, Cyprus, Greece, Spain, Venezuela, etc. So I speak 5 languages. I am a recurring startup entrepreneur. So I've built 3 startups, raised capital for 2 of those, had 1 exit. I became the director of a startup program called Startup Boost here in Los Angeles. We trained over 100 startups. They went on to raise more than 40 million, got into Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 startups, of course, Plug and Play as well, and many other of the sort of well-renowned and investing accelerators out there. So we'd essentially train about 8 teams every 6 months out of about 200 to 300 candidates, and would select the small number of startups that we would train in that sort of cohort. Through that process, and everything really kind of changed for me when I actually met Eddie. As he explained earlier, he's German-Russian, speaks 3 languages. He was the head of product and innovation for one of the largest agencies in the US, and he was essentially prototyping and building products for some of the largest brands out there. But when I saw the methodology that he was applying, wink, wink, it involves no code. He was essentially spending on average between $100 and $1,000 to build out MVPs, launch them in the market, test them, and be able to further grow out that product. And so it was obvious to me that that was a very innovative way about going about things. And I immediately brought him into the cohort. We started training founders and realized, essentially that this insight really had the power to train a lot more and to empower many more people. And so our mission from there on became to democratize no code, but always focusing on essentially empowering non-technical people. So we empower non-technical founders, non-technical digital creators, and essentially focus in on the goals. We're an educational company. And so we've created a flagship program that now has more than 200 startups around the globe, again, focused on training non-technical people. And we've had the pleasure of working with amazing partners, including some major schools, great accelerators, and some amazing nonprofits as well. We've been able to sort of train people who are in less fortunate circumstances. So I wanted to kind of just start off by talking very basically what no code really is. And then we'll jump into some examples after that. So what no code actually is, no code is actually, one of the definitions is that is the art of creating a unique solution to a problem that could have been written with code, but that an individual made using visual methods without coding. A better way to understand it is looking at the evolution of programming. We've seen that we went from, so basically to break it down, all computers understand are 1s and 0s, Morse code. And we used to essentially deliver those 1s and 0s through punch cards and At the time, we had these massive computers, probably the size of an apartment building. And over time, we realized, okay, we probably want to do this a better way. And as processing power became better, we created all these cool programming languages: Python, PHP, Perl, Java, C++, etc. When we're talking about no code, we also call it visual programming. It's just a visual interface that allows you to build software. So it's basically, you can think of it like a drag and drop builder to create and build these functionalities and build simple or very complex software leveraging no code solutions. So you don't have to understand code and you don't have to write coding language to be able to build software anymore. If we look a little bit at how that evolved in terms of the tools. So when we talk about no code, it's also a movement, and it's a movement that started when all these new tools started coming out that allowed to, like, non-technical people to essentially build software. So started off even, before this, there were lots of other iterations, but we'll start in the 2000s when WordPress and Drupal kind of led the way. Also, you kind of still needed to know how to code here. 2010, we saw platforms like Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, quite templatized, but allowed people to build at least websites, landing pages, and e-commerce stores. And now we're just talking about this entire new suite of tools who just unveil this massive opportunity that are much more flexible, that allow people to build much more scalable solutions. And it's very exciting to see this movement. So there are essentially over 1,200 tools out there, and they all have a different purpose. Usually they fall into two categories. Either it is building software or it is automating systems. So that's maybe where there's a bit of misunderstanding. A lot of companies are calling themselves no code, and they're more like automation. So it's a little bit of a debacle on Twitter at the moment, but I won't get too much into that. Let's talk about how it really works. So essentially, this is what designing kind of looks like when you build with code. You're adapting the code base, and that design is changing. Here, we're talking, when we build with no code, it's much more visual, drag and drop. The interface looks a lot more like a Photoshop than kind of just a console. When we talk about creating the logic behind these kind of designs, this is what it used to look like. So again, it's sort of writing out full sentences of code. And now we're talking about breaking that into plain English to create sort of, if I hover over this button, I'd like for that button to turn from red to blue, for example. So some examples of some of these interfaces. This is Webflow, looks more like a visual designer. Again, beautiful web experiences here. Then we have others which are more sort of geared towards iOS and Android apps. So this is Adalo. Drag and drop components. The logic, as you can see, you can set the destination of where things are bringing you. I'm really kind of oversimplifying things so people understand the gist of it, and we can get into more in-depth questions as well later. This is a third example, Bubble, one of the most powerful sort of web app builders. Here you can see a little bit more of the logic. So let's say that someone clicks on a button to essentially sign up. It's going to sign up the user. It's going to send an email to that user. It's going to direct that user to the home page. And so as you see, it's all written out in sort of plain English. And of course, there are many benefits that come from building this way. I just want to kind of bring up a couple or highlight the ones that are beneficial for startups, because that's sort of what we're talking about today. So this is actually a little model that was developed by Forward Partners, a VC firm in the UK based out of London. They talk about no code being the new model of building software or startups. And so here are some of the benefits that they highlighted in this little chart. Before, to build, time to building your MVP was about a year. Could take a little bit more, could take a little bit less. Now we're talking about being able to build MVPs in about 6 weeks. We usually say 6 to 8 weeks, depending. The cost used to cost about $50,000, and oftentimes that was spent on developers or agencies. Now, essentially about $1,000. When we talk about team size, we can go from multiple people, so a front-end developer, back-end developer, a designer, et cetera, to just a team of one person. So it could be just the founder building out himself. And the capabilities go from the old model being, you pretty much have to be technical to, you can be non-technical. So this is why this is catching a lot of people's attention. There's been a lot of large funding rounds going towards sort of no-code startups. And what we're realizing is that people are getting more and more excited about it. This is a quote from Jason Calacanis. He is an entrepreneur, angel investor, and the host of This Week in Startups and Angels. He says, startups being able to get to year 2 with 200K in revenue without having to hire developers is the greatest unlock I can think of right now for our economy and entrepreneurship. And I absolutely am in agreement with Jason on this point. But let's check out some of the real world examples. And now Eddie's going to jump in, just talk about a couple of those. And at the end, we'll kind of like take questions.
Awesome, Christian. Thank you so much again. So yeah, let's talk about some examples, and we will be covering a lot. So see this as inspiration of what can be built, and then more concretely, we will actually showcase what we've built. So in this case, example number 1, this is a website called ClearSegment. It is a B2B SaaS platform that allows data buyers to identify targeting segments for all of their marketing campaigns. So this entirely was built in 10 days. The actual cost for everything, hosting, building, and having all of it set up was around $40. And the tools that were used for this in particular are Webflow, Airtable, MemberStack, and Zapier, right? Even if you compare this to a traditional model, you would never achieve that in 10 days for $40. However, today with no code, that's possible. Example 2, another startup that we've built is Proofreader.ai. That platform allows you to upload any visual content, so a PDF, an image, a PowerPoint presentation, and it will proofread that content for you. One thing that I want to really point out is the cost to build and the cost to develop. So here, in this case, we built it for under $1,000. And it was built in 21 days, in under 21 days. And then the tools that were used for this here include Webflow. You can also see we tapped into the Google Cloud Vision API. So we used their AI model to identify characters in text, and then the language tool API to really, do the proofreading. The next example, here we're talking about Sizely. Sizely is an e-commerce tool allowing sellers around the world to visualize their sizing, their clothing sizing. And here too, this was built for under $1,000. The time to build this entire platform was 90 days. We're currently at 36,000 users, and the revenue just for an example like this is currently at $12,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Next up, and this is a little bit more of a fun example. This is Clamly. This has been developed, or this was developed quite a while ago. This allows you to shorten your URL the second you share it with someone, and that individual opens up that URL. A cryptocurrency miner is mining cryptocurrency in the background while that individual is just viewing their page. So the total cost to build this was around $600, built in 14 days. In its heydays, we had over 200,000 monthly users on this, and the total revenue generated just from a website like this was $38,000. Quite frankly, this website was shut down because browsers start identifying cryptocurrency mining software, so they disallowed that. So this particular project got obsolete. So now, stepping back, I want to kind of like showcase how you can build simple as well as more complex no-code products. So just imagine on the left, you have your no-code platform where you build the login, the sign up, the payments, the database, the user management. You create, various user flows and logic and so on, as well as notifications. And for many, that's already a startup. That's already a product that provides value. However, for those who want to essentially extend the capability, they have the ability to tap into an AI model, either a custom developed AI model or an AI model from Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, or tap into other data sources. So in this case, be it a stock exchange, be it weather data, be it ride traffic data, be it ordering data, whatever data. So in other words, third-party data sources, as well as use Amazon, Google, and Microsoft for their various services, be it hosting, their cognitive services, and so on. And all of that will be connected via an API. And I know for many non-technical founders, this is a really, really scary word. However, you will be building the API connection with no code. So in other words, it's a simplified view on how to connect outside services back to your application, all without writing a single line of code. So next up, I would like to showcase some additional success stories from the community. Here we have Nadim, who built Nuash Stay. Nuash Stay is pretty much the luxury version of Airbnb. He also is a non-technical founder, and they were able to scale Nuash Stay to $5 million in annual revenue, all with no code. And something I really want to highlight, and more importantly, it was all done without investors or funding, because the cost to build and maintain your no-code platform is so minimal that you don't necessarily need outside funding to keep going with your startup. Next up, we have Danny. Danny has a really interesting story. She quit her job without a plan B, discovered no code and was totally new to no code and this entire movement. And within 8 weeks, she was able to build Scribbly.io, which is a content marketing service. And she was able, since she started with Scribbly.io, to scale it up to $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue within her first 12 months. Again, super impressive story. So now, just to kind of like really showcase pretty much like all examples that you can build in no code and more, but ultimately just to illustrate what you can build, I would like to cover a couple additional areas. So in other words, you can build apps like Uber, Lyft, Tinder, WhatsApp, and Instacart. And those apps or those copies have been built already, or we've seen them in the no code space being built. So someone built an Uber or a Tinder clone fully with no code. And then also allowing you features such as geolocation, messaging, real-time tracking, in this case for Uber, and Tinder in this case. In addition, you can also build marketplaces. So marketplaces where you have 2 or more parties exchanging either goods and services, or in this case, Airbnbs. So in other words, you can create marketplaces such as an Airbnb, an Upwork, Amazon, an Indiegogo, as well as crowdfunding campaigns that are a little bit more fintech oriented, such as a Kickstarter, a Patreon, and so on, eBay and Fiverr, and allowing you for the core features such as, listing the goods, so in this case the housing listings, as well as identifying how you're building this entire split payment functions, right? When you have, let's say, 2, 3, or 4 parties involved in a transaction, how can you essentially split out all of the payments, and then also obviously make sure that you're also getting a platform fee into it. So next up, here are some social networks. So we've also seen YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram clones that were all built in no code as well, allowing you for the social media type functions such as messaging, notification, the upload of images, videos, tweets, and whatnot. But all of this has been already built, or products like YouTube and LinkedIn have been already built with no code, ultimately showcasing what's possible today. Lastly, here are some more interesting products that we've also seen, such as a Netflix clone, a Salesforce CRM platform that someone built, a Pipedrive, Slack, Eventbrite, and even a Zoom application, the application that we're currently using. That was also where someone actually copied or created a clone of Zoom, also built with no code, allowing you for features such as video streaming, video calls, and then various automation scenarios in it. So lastly, if you want to check out some more examples of active startups that are using no code, low code, feel free to visit our website, wearenocode.com/showcase. There you can check out, I think we have 50 other examples in there, but I think at this point, you get the point. We've a lot. We essentially shared a lot of examples. So now the final answer is, can you build your app idea in no code? In many instances, the answer is yes, but there's a huge however that I would like Christian to dive a little bit deeper on, because it is a however that we really, really want to hammer down across all of our founders.
Yeah, I'm usually the bearer of bad news at this point in the presentation, but essentially I'll try to make it relatively short. For those of you who are experienced in startups and have already gone through the process yourself, you understand that essentially building an app, building the technology is not enough. And a study showed that was done in 2016 that about 90% of the apps in the App Store were zombie apps people were not using. And on top of that, another sort of study showed that the number one reason why startups were failing was because there was no market need. A lot of people are basically building out these products and then just hoping that people will use them. It's kind of this build it and they will come mentality, which is a huge mistake for founders usually. And as one of the godfathers of startup methodology, his name Steve Blank says, he says, build and they will come is not a strategy, it is a prayer. I find that very funny. But essentially all that to say that, a startup, a product is not a startup, and we need all of these different elements that need to be built as well to be able to have a successful startup. So, what does the customer even want? What business model is going to allow me to generate revenue? What kind of pricing should I have? How can I run sales, marketing, partnerships? How do I figure out what the best next step for me is? Is it bootstrapping? Is it fundraising? Is it an alternative method of funding? Is it, so I think that this is the reason why at WeAreNoCode, we built a program. Our flagship program is called the No-Code Startup. And we've essentially realized that we need to combine the power of both of these, startup methodology with no-code. And we've created an action-based program for early stage non-technical founders to build, launch, and monetize their startup without writing a single line of code. And we very much see it as the future of entrepreneurship for the early stage. Some people will choose to build in no code and then migrate to another platform when they're scaling to millions of people. Some people will choose to run $20 million businesses alone. Essentially, it all comes down to what people are trying to accomplish. What we do is that we combine this idea of the methodology behind a startup accelerator and all these other things, building community, building customer base, partners, et cetera, with product school. So how do you build, launch, test, and iterate a product if you're non-technical? And so our goal is really to empower non-technical founders and to help them build out their app without being techies, then to learn how to acquire users and slowly nurture those users and turn them into paying customers. And then finally, save a bunch of time and money along the journey. Because we, having kind of gone through about 200 to 300 applications every 6 months, you just realize that there are hundreds and hundreds of founders spending a huge amount of their savings and a large amount of their life towards ideas and with very little progress to show for it. So that's the problem that we're trying to tackle. And the way we tackle it is by providing really all the things that people need. So the know-how, sort of step-by-step methodology, coaching, to make sure people are focused on the right things at the right time. We have a networking element, so we have a growing community of no-code founders around the world. We have a massive perks discounts package, and of course, video support so that we can show people the mistakes they're making instead of just telling them what's going wrong. The aim for us is really creating founders of the future, people who are able to, and more specifically, to make non-technical people empowered again. And I think that, we moved from a generation for about the past 30 years where you needed to be techie to be able to take advantage of the kind of software opportunities out there. And now we're coming full circle, I believe, where, sales comes back to becoming one of the most powerful skills to have. But in our mission, we're looking to create these founders of the future, people who are essentially able to identify and fine-tune opportunities very quickly, build out their MVPs cost effectively and without developers, and be able to iterate and turn users into paying customers without having to be, a hard seller. A lot of people say, I'm not good at sales. You don't have to be good at sales if you're doing it the right way. And with that, I really want to open up the floor because I'm sure people have questions that go deeper into kind of no code. Others will be more interested in terms of how this movement might be applying to them. There's a lot of cutting edge stuff happening in the industry right now. And we've been lucky to be sort of influencers in this space and helping people discover how they can unleash the power of this.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Christian. And so I'll kind of kick things off here as we collect and aggregate and curate some of the questions and comments that I'm sure are about to come through the chat area. My first question is one, are you cheating? Right. I mean, isn't there this process of like, oh my gosh, like, you hear these stories about how you had to like walk uphill both ways through the snow, through all the, like, are you making it almost too easy type of a thing? Let's start with that kind of like process, and how do you kind of overcome that mindset of what founders are thinking about the hurdles that it takes to grow a successful startup?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it really goes to the depth of kind of entrepreneurship when it comes down to it. Entrepreneurship, let's just face it, every single business now is a software business. And so the democratization of these kind of tools simply means that now people who are non-technical also have a shot at building out businesses in this sort of modern world. And, you know, we're not against coding at all. That's a big miscommunication, I think, in this world. Of course, the movement's called no code, but we see a lot of great developers leveraging these tools to build the majority of their stack very quickly, and then be able to focus their sort of talented energy in more complex parts that they're trying to solve. So potentially creating a machine learning algorithm themselves, or something a little bit more complex. So it's really just about, you know, this is a natural evolution. We don't see it as like, this is going to disrupt a lot, but it's just a natural evolution in the building of software. And if you think of it, every single industry is not dealing with code. You don't see like video editors, you know, messing around with the code. They have a visual interface to build and to work. Same thing with designers, right? So I think it's a powerful movement, and people just need to be aware that it's around, because it's going to change a lot of things, entrepreneurship, but also education. And we're excited to be at the center of that.
Yeah, I think just one quick comment to that. The tools have been improved, or the tools that we currently have are just better. So for instance, back in the day, you had, you know, a little stone to hammer things down. Nowadays, you have a hammer that is ergonomically aligned with your hand, and, you know, make sure that, you know, you're not having a hard time hammering things. And so the question is that considered cheating? We don't think so. It's just a better tool to essentially solve modern day problems.
I also want to comment that if anybody that's watching this ever needs help raising funds for their startup and needs to come up with $40 to get your company off the ground, feel free to help me out, and I'll connect with some of my investor network.
I mean, really good point. Something that we've seen more and more in this entire space is the rise of the solo entrepreneur that is non-technical, is able to build, to validate and build his entire startup by themselves, and then at a later point considers funding. So we cherish that, because this ultimately means that, you know, you're frugal, you can quickly iterate and test. The second you have product market fit and you need essentially additional funding, that's when you reach out to investors, and that's essentially where it counts.
Can you perhaps enlighten the audience with, you know, is this basically to try to create an analogy? Because I think people understand things from an analogy perspective when something's so unique and innovative. Is this like, hey, the idea is that you're building this framework, you've created this kind of code ecosystem that's native to WeAreNoCode. They're building the framework, things are monetization, and then at some point you're going to have to convert into like a fully coded ecosystem? Or is this something that's like scalable and it's going to work in perpetuity?
Yeah, happy to address that. A couple of points. To our program, we're essentially a mix between a startup accelerator and a product school, because there's still, you know, so many different options when you essentially get into that space. So we want to guide all of our, or we are guiding all of our founders to really focus on what they need to accomplish. And then when it comes to the no code, when it comes to building startups, some use no code just to validate, some use no code to validate and build out their first MVP that gets them maybe to 5,000, 10,000 users, and then they have difficulties because they have specific features that they need, which we will also get into, because that was a question. And some others, they're like, hey, I've you know, my startup is pretty streamlined. We have 100,000, 200,000 users. They are not doing, you know, machine learning on our platform in real time and uploading terabytes of data. So in this case, for those individuals, they can essentially scale their no-code platform to 100K users without a problem. And then at some point, it's personal preference if they want to essentially have that converted into full-on custom code to scale to millions and hundreds of millions of users. totally. But at that point, you have the means, you validated the market, and you also have a high certainty on the feature sets that actually work to essentially justify that expense.
Yeah, it's kind of an all in or nothing situation right now, or that's how it feels like. I think that's what a lot of people are learning looking at the headlines. They watch Shark Tank and they basically start believing in this idea that you can just start raising capital these days with a pitch deck. And so we see so many people focusing in on like, how can I polish up my pitch deck versus how can I build an actual business and show that there's value in customers behind it. And the other thing is there's been a maturity in the entrepreneurship and investment scene. Basically, fewer deals are being invested in, larger amounts, and those are going towards increasingly towards companies that have revenue already, 3 to 6 months of revenue or solid traction. And so we're really just saying there's a gap happening where everyone at the beginning of this ecosystem like doesn't have a straight path and need to be prepared. And frankly, I think that every investor is sick of looking at decks that it's just a deck. It's just a deck, maybe a good team, but like that's a waste of their time. So we're investing our energy at the beginning of the funnel to be able to create and breed founders that are ready for the next step, whether that be get into Techstars, get into Y Combinator, or hey, they're ready to raise capital now. And when it comes to kind of will you outgrow no code, we see it scaling up to a couple 100,000 people right now in terms of monthly active users. We know that that's continually being pushed every day. But also we realize that there's like every single platform, every single technology platform has to make changes when they scale, like regardless of its code or no code, you're going to have to rebuild a big part of the back end. And so all those factors, basically, it comes down to like, well, what are the other options? Unless you have 50 grand to shoot to a developer and just hope and pray that you're going to build that perfect product market fit, it really is like an iteration process. And it really can start with just a couple of tools, sometimes even just one, building a first experience out, gauging the interest, pivoting, doing micro pivots from there. And then, we see also companies that have raised capital that have gotten into Y Combinator with full no-code stacks. We've seen people raise hundreds of millions of dollars and process billions of dollars through platforms built on no-code. And so, it's an exciting time. And one thing that me and Eddie are just so stoked about, one, seeing the aha on the faces of people who think like, oh, there's no way I can ever do anything myself. Like this attitude that like, oh, I just need a technical co-founder. So they end up, wasting a lot of time trying to find someone or they, try to raise capital from their friends and family to build the first product. It's always this sort of, I have an idea, I need to build it. And it's like, all of us here know that that's not the right approach. No-code tools just simply allow people to actually make a difference. And it's not just like, we're kind of sick of seeing all these like incredibly well-skilled like MBA students coming out of the best schools in the world and still in analysis paralysis because they're just like overthinking it, doing business model canvas stuff, doing like, and all that stuff is very important. But if you don't have the hard skills to build, launch, test, grow, monetize, like, unfortunately, you're just in analysis paralysis. So we're just trying to like mend that gap. And then on the other hand, we have the best developers, the best no coders building experiences that no one cares about. So there's a problem on both sides. We're just kind of bringing both together and saying like, hey, there's a solution. And guess what? It's a solution that's like perfectly fit for the stage you're at.
Well, awesome. So do you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about, the economics? You're talking about some pretty low barriers to entry. Is this something that's like that WeAreNoCode access is like a subscription model? Is it like you're buying off a one app type fee? Can you maybe elucidate the business model a little bit for people wanting to do business with you?
Yeah. So right now we're really just essentially focused on the B2C side. We have a lot of like, there's just so many people out there who are in need of being able to actually build out their thing. And they're right now looking for developers. And it can be very frustrating when you kind of look at the prices or try to look for a co-founder. For us, we essentially see ourselves as an action-based program. So we're trying to connect the humans and their goals and leveraging these tools to be able to get to those goals, right? We started right now with founders, but there are also other things in the pipeline. We are really focused around action-based curriculums. really breaking things down into step-by-step and teaching hard skills. And so we combine those things. Right now, we're focused heavily on sort of on founders, and it's, the best way to describe it is kind of like an educational program. We see ourselves as an educational institute. And so, you can kind of compare it to, what if a pre-accelerator program had a baby with General Assembly or something like that, and you had a program. So we have, program tuition. Essentially, it is, about the same cost as 1 credit at a major university to get access to the full curriculum and all the templates and essentially blueprints around that to go quicker, but also weekly coaching, video support, because we like to not just tell people what to do, exactly show them specifically when it's technical, like you need to be able to get into someone's solution and be like, hey, here's where you're having an issue. And it comes with a 300K sort of discount package for credits and for more than 175 different services, as well as this awesome community. Like right now, what we're seeing is like the community is going nuts. Like they're all in the same mentality. Like, hey, we're non-technical, we want to build, but now like they're asking for us to create, like we've started creating these like one-on-one video networking events where they're essentially doing like these short chats with other founders. And in that way, they're able to like skill swap, they're able to find accountability buddies, they're able to, and that's ultimately what we start realizing is a much bigger thing for us than even the our program. It's like the power of like unleashing that base of knowledge and being able to have a collaborative space of people in the same kind of like-minded, like, hey, I believe in hard work, but everyone knows you need help along the way.
Well, absolutely. It's all about community. And when I did get to visit the set of Shark Tank a couple times, that when I asked what's the secret to making a business famous to Damon John, he says, look, the big value is creating a community and being able to help that community grow. So with that being said, next question is are there any limitations as to what type of applications you can build with your product, right? Like, I mean, obviously you're taking something that's already existing, or how do you ideate as something that potentially doesn't even exist yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are some clear limitations, and we want to be really upfront. So if you're planning to develop a custom AR or VR experience, no code is not for you. You can integrate your AR VR experience with a platform that might live on mobile or web. That's fine. But if that's your main goal, no code is not your place. In addition, if you're considering building a brand new blockchain, totally no code is not the place. If you're considering to interact with a blockchain such as the Ethereum blockchain and you want to do read or write or accept payments, that is totally possible. And then lastly, and this is something I want to also highlight, is when it comes to HIPAA compliance, there are some no-code tools that cater towards that. However, there's only 1 or 2 that I know of. So if you're building a platform that needs to be HIPAA compliant, you might are pigeonholed into 1 or 2 options. Something that we've seen how founders handle that, they essentially don't actually ask any personal identifiable sensitive information to essentially go around that. So that's possible. So that's one way. But yeah, if you're a software business, a marketplace, an app of any kind, and ideally have a revenue model from the very beginning, something that we heavily encourage, no code is perfectly positioned for that.
Awesome. So next question is, and it builds off a little what I was asking before, but how does the technology scale as the product founders are looking to get more complicated and complex? And should there become a need in the future to graduate into full code stack, do you offer resources and guidance on where to find that, as opposed to, well, good luck finding some coders?
So I think this is a really good question. In many instances, these are concerns that come in year 1 or year 2 of your startup. So it's like, should I be worried about how I'm going to exit my company without actually having built it? It's like, hey, it's good problems to have. So what we usually focus on is like, hey, let's validate, let's build your MVP, let's get customers on top, and then essentially observe how you're growing. If you have specific features that cannot be built in no code, you always have the option to have it custom built and being integrated into your no code platform, right? You essentially can integrate it. And then lastly, let's say you are blowing up and you're like, hey, we have 5 million requests a day, that's essentially where you basically have to say, hey, we need to rebuild that entirely in custom code. But so does every other platform. Every other platform has the same issue. When startups start with fully in custom code, they go through multiple iterations to accommodate scaling issues, to come from, able to cater to 100,000 users to 500,000 to 2 million and so on. So for many individuals think that you build it once and it's done and it's scalable till infinite, but that's not true. In custom code, you have multiple iterations where the entire structure has to be rebuilt to account for those issues. The same applies also in no code. Just no code in the early stages allows you to be flexible, and then you always have those options of like fully building it out custom, integrating custom code into it, or in this case, continuing with your no code platform.
Awesome. So here's a hyper-specific question. One of our audience members would like to know if no code can integrate with SKU, SKU Vault for inventory and ShipStation. Yeah,
this is a really good question, and I actually just looked it up. So we consider this as an outside service as long as they have an API, and in this case, SKU Vault has an API. You can integrate with them to either get account information from you or to push any other information into it. As long as that outside service has an API, which in other words is like an interface to another service, you can integrate with your no-code platform to it, and either to request data or to push data to that service.
And so is one of those that exists already is Salesforce, because the same person has a site that offers sales, perfume, and fragrances, and they're spending $10K a month on coding.
Yep. So for any larger organization such as Salesforce, they usually have very well documented API documentation. Just one big note: with all of the APIs, there might be sometimes cost associated to it per call, usually, or on a monthly basis. But this is the case for no code or code. Just to kind of like educate on that as well.
So is it a fair analogy, would you say, that you're, to some extent, just again, trying to create an analogy that hopefully the audience as no code folks can understand, are you kind of like the Zapier for app development in terms of connecting the dots for integrations and modules and putting on a platform?
Yeah, so Zapier, for example, is also considered a no-code platform, right? Zapier specialized in being the glue between one or two services, right? So let's say with your no-code platform, you can also use Zapier to do that, or you can essentially build out your own Zapier, to essentially communicate with other outside services. So either both of those approaches are totally valid.
And we also see a lot of people connecting other services, right? Not just the core technology, but also you want to connect all these other things. That's where Zapier really comes in and is very useful. No code. Right now, we're talking about entrepreneurship. We also see such a tremendous need in enterprise and upskilling people internally so that they're stopping to do all these recurring tasks over and over. And essentially, through COVID, we've seen that people have really had to tighten the belt, some companies. And there's no better way than, essentially adopting some of these. It allows you to simply do more with fewer people. And so, everyone's talking about so many people losing their jobs because of automation and artificial intelligence, that we basically say like, well, instead of them losing their jobs, imagine if people started investing in upskilling their staff and getting much more out of that staff. We all have to upskill. It's like full stop. Like, the world is going in a direction right now, and specifically every single business requiring a certain level of technology, automation, and all that. Like, people just need to like basically wake up. It's like, I think that this was kind of like a bit of a wake up call for people to like bring their companies online. And now it's like, the people who didn't do that before the recession, like, a lot of those people are out of business right now. And so that's where we say, like, these things are out there. You just have to understand how they really apply to your goal, whether it's, being more effective internally, connecting your sales and marketing department together properly, creating certain marketing automations on the front end, building software that allows people to work better internally. Like all of these, and that's where we say like the tools are out there. There are just too many of them, and people are confused. They're running around trying to figure out like what tool do I use for what thing. We have experience in that area, and we can guide them towards the right tool set. And then we essentially, what we do is that we teach people a curated list of the most powerful platforms that we use and allow them to solve their problem through either combining those or using one of those, depending on what the problem is. When we talk about the software building side of the things, there are kind of like two things, right? There's all-in-one builders, like one platform where you can do the whole thing.
Right.
And then there's another, like Eddie was mentioning earlier, what we did with Clear Segment. It's SaaS platform. We connected a couple of tools, a little bit of Zapier in between. Perfect. I think there's another thing we're not talking about is the biggest problem, I think people are basically not taking action. It's a fear of failure that frankly, when I was in the early stages of my first companies, I was emotionally crippled by. Like it literally like takes over. It's like, because you have such high expectations for yourself. And with no code, the cool thing is, you don't get to fall in love with your company because you don't have time to, because it goes so quickly from like idea to like it's out there that like it suddenly becomes this game. And I think like when people start changing their philosophy from I'm building, a massive company right now to like, hey, I have a couple assumptions. I want to just test these out, see what's up, see if people are responding to it. And from there, like, you throw a couple spaghettis against the wall, one sticks, and then you have to run, and so yeah, it's really about just creating a healthier ecosystem around entrepreneurship where people are not feeling the pressure. They're feeling the excitement and creativity of this idea that you can experiment. And you can do that at a fraction of the cost without it, without necessarily having to even, Eddie built so many platforms before even leaving his full-time job. Like you can do this on the side to begin with. And we often like tell founders like, hey, don't quit a full-time job right away just to pursue entrepreneurship. That's not the right approach. There's so much you can do with 3, 4, 5 hours a week over time. And first do that and then transition, right? Reduce the risk. And then, we see this as very much as a revolution and an evolution. So it's like kind of like the era for non-technical founders.
So how involved do you get in the actual growth of a startup? Obviously, you kind of have this, I don't know if it's an accelerator, incubator type of system where people could come in, ideate, MVP, grow. Is a part of the model that you're trying to do is like, are you offering, like if they're getting a certain amount of success, that you're offering like education on marketing and support? And are you guys doing any kind of like equity play with these companies as far as like if they are a Moonshot type of opportunity, are you saying, hey, we like what you're doing, we want to negotiate some sort of equity partnership with these companies and these founders?
Yeah, I think on a larger scale, we really want to democratize entrepreneurship and allow even the smallest problems to be solved by providing tools and education to non-technical people to essentially go ahead and solve that. In addition, what we do through all of our training sessions and so on, the type of questions change over time by each of the founders. In the beginning, it might be validation, then essentially getting their first customers, to essentially, hey, how do I scale? What techniques should I use? How about SEO and PR outreach and so on? And we assist individuals along the journey. We believe that seeking funding is important. However, we also cherish bootstrapping and individuals that essentially, are able to like bootstrap their startup out to essentially scale it out, just owning 100% of the startup. And for some, we're currently looking potentially into funding mechanisms to support our founders. However, it is not our main focus right now, and founders see it themselves. They're like, wow, I can actually, and this is the monthly cost that I pay with my stack. I don't necessarily need to, seek funding. Usually funding comes when founders need more people on the team and have difficulties figuring out how to essentially pay for them or slice the cake, in other words.
Yeah, and the way we position ourselves is very much just early stage. We position ourselves at early stage, usually pre-product or while people are going through the struggles of building out that MVP. And then really preparing those founders to be well-rounded, so that regardless of what the next step looks like for them, we just want them to understand what each step looks like. Sometimes VC funding will absolutely be the only way in a specific scenario. In other circumstances, we see this also just being kind of like, a lot of people are building right now like $10 to $20 million businesses with 1 to 5 people. So it's really a range for us. We see ourselves as like, hey, you just need to understand what these different paths mean, why one path would be useful over another, and then make your own decisions. We're even seeing that, like, in terms of funding, like, all of us know that there's a huge difference between angel investors, VC investors, friends and family investors. Well, now there's even more and more. If you go to like Indie VC, they've created something called Intro, which is essentially introducing people to all these alternative financing mechanisms that may or may not be adapted to what they're doing. So we really think that there's a lot of shifts happening here. All we're trying to do is just say like, hey, we want to own the early stage essentially and prepare them for their next step.
So last question, and then we're going to wrap up our event today with some final words with one of our community managers. But how do you guys manage the process of something that may consider to be sensitive intel or IP, that like, hey, I've got this amazing idea, but I don't know that I want to bring it to you guys because maybe somehow my idea is not going to be secure or copied? How do you guys address those kind of like patent type of idea concerns?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much a question that is at this point, people in the startup industry have all kind of agreed that, things like non-disclosure agreements, they're pretty much irrelevant. A lot of, they don't stand up in court. They're, non-enforceable basically. And so I think that it is pretty much a beginner's mindset to think that someone's out there to rob your idea. We do not sign non-disclosure agreements, but we essentially we have a very small knit private channel with the founder and 2 of the members of our team to support those founders. So what we say is, hey, only all your private stuff, only share it with us. And whatever you want to share in the larger community. But we all are also seeing that people are more and more just being very open. And I think that it's like, there's much more downside not talking about what you're building. A lot of patents too, like when it comes to software, also, it doesn't really work. Even some of the largest companies are trying to fight, and it's just, so I would say that's probably not your first concern. Yes, we abide to confidentiality, but we don't sign non-disclosure agreements. And I think that people need to get in the habit of just kind of saying like, hey, if I want to, gather all the resources I need to pull this thing together, I'm gonna have to talk about it very openly and to a lot of people, whether it's raising capital or getting employees, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
go ahead.
Just on that, we speak to 20 to 60 founders on a weekly basis. So if we were in the position to sign an NDA with every founder that is in the idea or early stage product phase, it would be very limiting overall. So what we usually say, it's like software is really hard to patent, even if you want to, there's little chance. And then also traction and actually having customers, outweighs all of that. So as long as you can get to that, it's a totally different ball game, but focus on that rather than protecting ideas that may or may not be one, protectable, or in that case, valuable in the open marketplace.
Well, it seems like what you guys are doing, Christian and Eddie, is brilliant and empowering entrepreneurs to be able to ideate and then actually confirm their thesis on whether or not the model is going to work and continue to grow and build a sustainable startup business into the future. I know one of our guests is asking if you can share your contacts, right? So yeah, can you please just share all your contacts, all your investor relations, all your founder companies? I'm assuming it's the contact info, so that should be in the chat session. But connect with these guys on their website, Christian at WeAreNoCode.com and Eddie, EDDY at WeAreNoCode.com. But thanks for being here today as our last guest workshop presenters. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Iraq. I also want to thank Alex and Hanye and all the different people who have put this together. It's been fantastic. I like Moonshot House very much. I've become emotionally invested in this community. And we really appreciate you bringing us here and allow us to share this with other founders and non-technical people.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. So that's our day. That's our event, hitting with the high note. Right. So super excited to have everybody here at the Moonshot House community today. Hopefully you got some amazing nuggets of information and wisdom that you can implement into your startup, your fintech company, your business, and continue to grow, ranging from venture capital all the way down to basically being able to launch a startup for as little as $40. Talk about innovation, right? So it's been an honor and privilege to have been your host today. Again, my name is Erock Christopher, CEO of This Famous Media Group, and we can help get your message to millions. And what I'd like to do is turn things over to the Moonshot House community manager, none other than Christine, to close out this prestigious event and share any final announcement and news.
Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. Like Erock said, my name is Christine, and I'm the community manager here at Moonshot House. I just want to say a quick thank you to Erock